Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we're going to discuss nutrient use and compliance and how good nutrient management is good for business. So joining us today are William Crookshank, Agriculture Manager with the Environment Agency's Advocacy and Engagement Team, and Agrii's Tom Land, National Fertiliser Product Manager. And this episode qualifies for basis and Naroso points. So good morning to you both and a very warm welcome to Tramlines. William, perhaps you could start us off by telling us a bit about your work at the Environment Agency.
Hello everyone. Yes, so what do I do? So the Environment Agency is charged with regulating agriculture, and my team is, I like to think we're a conduit between what goes on the ground and what happens in farming and what our officers see and what goes on in strategy, government policy, and with those who represent the sector. So I interface externally with DEFRA and the sector, and I interface with our officers on the ground, and I take what we see and the understanding we get of what goes on the ground, and I discuss that with the sector and DEFRA and try to shape what happens within those and the advice that goes to farmers. And then I take what DEFRA give me, so what they want agriculture to achieve and what we want us to achieve through regulation, and I translate that into what my officers do when they go down the farm gate to see farmers on a regulatory farm visit.
Yeah, thanks, William. And Tom, whilst you've contributed on so many of our podcasts and are known to many people within Agrii and Agrii customers, tell us a bit about what's your job really entail?
Yeah, my job has multi-factors, really, Tony. My title is National Fertiliser Product Manager, but that kind of encapsulates anything from fertiliser right way through to advice, either associated with the fertiliser or not. So it's really great to have William on the podcast today, because actually before you start selecting a fertiliser product out of the Tom Land catalogue of products, it's having a plan and knowing what we're going to use the right product, the right rate at the right time, and also take into account other external factors in terms of the soil environment and organic manures as well. So it covers products, my role, but also I filter down and keep agronomists up to date with advice and getting the best on farm in terms of nutrition in general, really.
And so, Tom, what does good nutrient management look like?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that a nutrient management plan is incredibly important and also brings huge value if used properly. I think sometimes the nutrient management plan is a folder on a shelf that gathers dust and doesn't get reviewed. And actually, you take this season as a case in point. It's appropriate that the nutrient management plan is reviewed more regularly than just the 1st of January. It is actually something that decisions are made, either recommendations are adjusted or alternative plans are made. And I think there's so much more we can get out of nutrient management plans that maybe growers don't often appreciate. Sometimes it might be a feeling that to meet a requirement, you create a nutrient management plan, when actually it actually takes into a lot of accounting for nutritional agronomy. So advice led recommendations based around products, but also solutions that may help reduce environmental impact as well.
And Tom, you talked there about reducing the environmental impact. William, let's bring you in here. So what does good nutrient management look like from your perspective?
So let's take a step back from that, and as I said, I look at what I see on the ground. So let's talk about what my officers see. And we're doing 4,000 farmer visits a year now since we had increased funding back in 2022. That came off at the back of us doing some work where we could show how we could help farmers and move them into compliance. And therefore, DEFRA said, right, to help us hit our environment improvement target of a 40% reduction in NP and sediment, we want you to go out there and do more farm visits. So we're doing 4,000 visits a year. They're targeted visits. We go where we think the biggest risk of pollution is, and I can expand on that if we want to. But what we are doing in that enforcement is enforcing predominantly farming rules for water, SAFO and MVZs. And farming rules for water requires farmers to have a plan. It requires them, there is a legal duty there to have a plan. So do what Tom is suggesting you do and have a plan. And that plan should be built off soil sampling. Again, that's a requirement. You've got to have relevant soil sampling. The reality, our folks on the ground find that about a third of farms don't have a plan, and about a third of farms don't have soil sampling. And when we talk to our NFU local representatives, they tell us that probably some of the farms that do have them don't actually use them. They just got them because they know they need them. So we see some real issues around nutrient and nutrient management, and that's what's driving diffuse pollution, not good management. We absolutely recognise that farming will lose nutrients. You can't put stuff into an open environment and not expect to lose it. Uncultivated grassland and woodlands lose nutrients. It's a process. But what we want to see, and what the regulations ask for, is that farmers don't create a significant risk of diffuse pollution. So we understand that they will lose some nutrients. RB 209 and all the planning documents calculate that they're going to lose some nutrients. Plants aren't wonderful technology. They don't take up everything you put on them. So we recognise that. But what we want to see is a plan that makes sure there isn't a significant risk. So you are only applying what the soil and the plant needs, and that's what the legislation says. If you're doing that, then we're happy and the world is good. We know you're going to lose something, but you're not creating a significant risk. If you're applying more than that, then there's a problem, and then you're going to be driving diffuse pollution. You're going to be losing things, and loss is bad for business. It's bad for the environment because you're losing it. It's bad for business because you're losing it. And it's fair to say, Tom will sell you probably a very specific product with exactly what you need in it, which is probably quite expensive, and you'll apply it very carefully. There are organic fertilizers are probably what drive our problems, our issues, because they are, let's say, they're not as good as Tom's products. They don't come with a number on the bag that tells you exactly how much NPK, whatever else there is in it. They're mixed up. So they're quite hard to manage. They're not the great product Tom has that you can apply with your technology very specifically. So that they are hard to manage. And that requires a bit more work to look after them. And equally, it's fair to say there are a lot of people out there who want to apply organic products to land. So there is a lot of supply of things coming out of digestate, AD systems, wastewater treatment plants, and farms. There are poultry units on the Wye who haven't got land associated with them, who are producing a very potent organic fertilizer. But all of these organic fertilizers need to fit within that plan. There needs to be a use for what is being applied to land. And that's what we want to see, because if that isn't there, then we are going to lose those products. They're valuable. It's a loss to the business. It's an impact on the environment. So good planning and good management and good application is what we want to see, and that's what the legislation requires.
Tom, William talks there about the fact that his team are finding that around a third of those farms that they visit don't have a nutrient plan. And I know that you're passionate about nutrient plans and the benefits that brings the farming business. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a concern when you look at, let's part of the organic manures side of things to start with, but the value of fertilizers, that they're not a low cost resource. There is a lot of investment required into fertilizers. So getting the fertilizer application right, but you've got to balance it with the organic manures that you might be sourcing, and if you're not accounting for that, you're potentially lining yourselves up for problems in the future, but also you're missing out on the financial benefit of actually properly accounting for and utilizing that manure to its biggest effect. I.e., if if you are taking on a manure onto your farm and you're just assuming it is something, there's a huge benefit from actually just testing or getting a lab result before you actually accept something. So you actually know what you're bringing on, because it might be that you're bringing onto your farm excess nutrients you don't need, i.e., you could be bringing on an organic manure high in P, and your soil indices are already high enough in P. And do you really actually need that? So I think it's worthwhile, looking at what you're bringing onto the farm and accounting for it within the farming system. And some people may be looking at options to maybe improve soil organic matter, and we know that certain types of organic manures are really useful in terms of helping to build soil fertility, maintain and build soil organic matter. But also we need to account for the other nutrients that might be in them and what longer term effects that might have.
I'd like to add to that, because we've got experience from down in the southwest with dairy farmers down there. One of the things we're really quite interested in is farm gate nutrient balance, which goes, dare I say, Tom, beyond your fertilizers, because we've got dairy farms down in the southwest who have looked at what they've got on their farm, and they're discovering that they've got enough phosphates in their sward, in their grass, that they're actually removing the phosphate that's previously been in the feed that they've been giving to cattle. So they're not only managing the phosphates coming onto their farm in forms of organic fertilizers or manufactured fertilizers, they're managing what's coming in the form of the food that is going into their herd, and that's saving the money. So there are mills down there now that are producing feed for cattle without phosphate in them because the farmers don't need it. They've probably got high indices as well, so they can probably start to draw down those indices as well. So they're probably mining what's already in their soil. That will turn around with time and they'll get back to a balance. But the more we can use what we've got, again, it's good for business. They're saving money by not taking it onto the farm.
That's a really important point, William, because I think people are starting to now realise that you've with a livestock system, it's well worthwhile accounting for what's coming in on a feed ration, and balancing what's going back to the farm. So that's a really good point to emphasise, and it's also a helpful point to growers, because there's probably some intensive livestock farming businesses that probably need to take account of that, really.
And William, you spoke earlier about, it's good for business. Do you have any case studies? Can you bring that to life? Because I'm sure farmers who are listening today will be thinking, well, this can cost a lot of money to make these changes.
I'll come in with an example again around that. Again, Southwest, we have some really good knowledge of the River Axe and the Axe catchment, because we work very closely with the farmers down there. But we've got farmers down there who we've moved up to a 6-month slurry storage system, so that they can spread their slurry at the right time when it's most appropriate. It's not been cheap for them. They are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds putting new slurry storage in place. They're putting the yard work in as well, so they're not collecting rainwater, they're not having to spread rainwater. What they are finding is that they can probably pay off the cost of that slurry store within a few years. Some of them are saying 3-4 years. They are saving enough in both fertilizer costs, not buying fertilizer and taking it on, but also not going out with their tractor spreading at times when they don't need to. So they're saving the cost of that new structure in a fairly short period. And then that money then goes onto the bottom line of the business. So again, it just emphasizing that good management is good for business. It's making really good use of what they've already got on their farm, rather than taking it out in the middle of winter when there's no use for it, and we know that all's going to happen is it's going to run off, it's going to leach, it's going to cause pollution.
Tom, I can see you there wanting to step in and say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I haven't got a huge amount of facts and figures at my fingertips, but the difference between applying, say, for example, a manure in the autumn compared to a manure in the spring that has a reasonably high readily available nitrogen content could be over £50 a hectare of lost nutrients, let alone accounting for the P and K, etc. as well. So just accounting for N losses through the system, that's a significant amount of financial loss, and also a high risk of pollution at the same time. So it goes back to understanding the value and having that discussion with your advisors around, well, if I do this, what does this look like? What are the financial benefits of doing this versus the financial benefits of looking to a system where I can maybe apply manures at a time when the crop is actually going to utilize it and take it up.
To find out more about nutrient use and compliance from the Environment Agency, click on the links in the podcast bio or speak to your Agrii agronomist or advisor. So let's focus on organic manures. We've mentioned it a few times so far in the podcast. How do we protect the environment and get the best for the farm? William?
So from my perspective, we recognise there are manures and there are manures. And there are manures with different things in them. And there are things like green compost and well-rotted FYM, which probably have a relatively low level of readily available nitrogen in them. But they have other benefits that can help make a healthy soil. Because let's be honest, the best soils, healthy soils, work best with the right amounts of nutrients and this sort of thing. So we understand that you need to apply some of this, not necessarily for the nutrients in it, but for the other soil structure benefits. But those readily available nitrogens are our biggest risks. They are the ones that are going to do one of three things, basically. Everyone knows this. They're either going to go into the air, or they're going to leach out into the soil, or they're going to do what we want them to do, which is go into the plant. So those things that have big lots of RAN in them, the slurries, the digestates, etc., need to be applied to crops that are there and they're going to take it up. Because if they're not applied at that time, it's just going to be lost, and that's going to drive the pollution. And that's why we've got a winter ready campaign on the which we've run for the last 2 years. We're going to run it again, encouraging farmers to make sure they are applying at the right time, that they are hanging on to their slurries to make sure they're putting them on when they've got something that's going to take that readily available nitrogen. Because if you put it on in the autumn, it's gone. It's not going to be there. You'll get your total N out of it. You'll get your stuff that's going to be mineralized and whatever else, and you'll get your P, that'll still be there. But your readily available nitrogen is gone, and that's just driving pollution. So we need to see it used at the right time. We need to see the right amount. We need to see it applied at the right time, i.e. not when it's raining. We need to see it applied, managing the risks of sloping land and this sort of thing that need to be thought about. And we know there are some farmers who do that really well. There are some farmers that don't, and you see that. We will all have seen farms that have used umbilicals and things where the area around the farmstead probably has a very high P indices because they've spread their slurry locally, because that's the easy way to do it. But that's not good farming. That's not making best use of those slurries. And so organics they're tricky. As I say, Tom will give you a product that says on the bag what it is, and you can apply it directly where you want to need it, and it takes a lot less management. Organics are much harder to ensure you're making the best use of them, but they are equally as valuable as what you're going to pay Tom a lot of money for.
Yeah. Tom, what would you add?
Yeah, I think we can't see manures and digestates and recycled materials as a waste, and it's get it onto land, and then we've solved the problem. We've put it there. There needs to be a definitive crop need, and that's something we're starting to build in with our side of nutrient management planning, is looking at long-term soil build-up of particular elements like phosphorus, particularly is understanding our growers' soil P levels increasing. It is a trend that we are seeing some of that happening, but we kind of need to build that as part of the nutrient management plan and the discussion that goes on with the grower around, are you importing manures, or do you need to export manures? Do you need to maybe look at getting that manure off the farm, or like we said earlier, go back to looking at what you're putting into the animals, what the rations are, and everything else like that as well. Because using the nutrient management plan to look at, things like P balances, but also nitrogen amounts, nitrogen requirements. It's really important, and that's why I say it's not some sort of dusty folder that sits on the shed. It is something on the shelf. It's not something that kind of you create to tick a box. It really can be a recommendation and a piece of advice that you continually review through the season.
And I'm going to come back on that one as well, because I think we know from an organic perspective, there are a lot of people out there who have got organic fertilizers in inverted commas that they need to find a demand for. So we have a supply and demand issue. And what I think we potentially see is that we have a supply that potentially outweighs the demand. And from a hard regulator's position, what I would say to farmers is, if you haven't got a need, just say no, and let these people go away and find somewhere else to find a need for what it is that they've got. Because if they haven't got a need for it, what they've got is a waste. And that's got to be treated in a very different way. So don't take it off them if you haven't got a need, because if you haven't got a need, you're going to pose a significant risk of diffuse pollution. And my folks are going to come to you and tell you not to do it again.
And how do we balance minimising that risk of water pollution and, on the other hand, maximising nutrient efficiency? Tom, what are your thoughts? How do we go about that?
Yeah, well, there's a whole load of technical and practical solutions that growers can take into account. And I'm a big fan of manure testing, because we RB209, Manna are fantastic tools. I'm a regular user of Manna, which helps an agronomist, an advisor, or a land manager to understand the nutrient availability from organic manures. So you can use set values, but actually, for the cost of around £100 a sample, if you, like William says, if someone's offering you something, maybe it is worthwhile getting a lab result, using a FACS advisor, or if you're FACS qualified yourself, using tools like Manna to help convert, understand what that is. There's a whole host of practical solutions, i.e. the use of cover crops, the use of application equipment that minimizes environmental risk. There's a lot of large contractors now using application technology that minimizes things like ammonia emissions, but also helps to get those slurries and digestates into the soil where they can get utilized. There's also tools in the toolkit. We have a product called Release that helps to make phosphorus more available to the growing crop, enabling the grower to manage their phosphorus inputs. We have a range of nitrification inhibitors for fertilizers, manures, slurries that are widely used by growers, but are incredibly effective at minimizing nitrous oxide losses and nitrate losses. But maybe in the future, these types of technologies will have more of a place as we go forwards. But there's a lot growers can do, and I think consulting, seeking advice is a really important one, because you need to understand what the risks potentially might be by utilizing something that might not necessarily bring you the benefits you first thought you were getting.
And William, what would you add that would help farmers find that balance between minimising pollution and maximising the value to the farm?
So I think that one of the important points that we are starting to see emerging is that there are technologies arriving that can change organic products into more precise products. So we get a lot of approaches from people who've got these technologies that will take a slurry and produce a dry faction, but then also produce liquid factions, which they can now separate out more of the N and P. So you end up with a more suitable product that could start to compete with your manufactured fertilizer. But they're a long way off, and all of the agronomists and AHDB will tell you that you should really only use about 50% of your fertilizer coming from organic. That's not just to keep Tom in business. That's that's good agronomy. That's the way it should be. But partly that's been driven by the fact that you don't have the knowledge of what you're using in the organic. So that's what we need to change. But Tom's right about the application technology and things. We're seeing 32-meter digestate bars being used now, precision onto growing crops. That sort of technology is what is needed. But again, it's technology that makes sure you're applying your valuable nutrients at the time when those valuable nutrients are going to be used. And that goes back to the point that that's good for business. And as long as the crop is taking them up at the rate it needs to take them up, that's good for the environment as well.
And Tom, last time we spoke, we were at Cereals just recently and talking about Agrii's initiative, the Smart Connected Farm. Can the elements within that initiative help the farmer achieve what we're talking about in this podcast?
Absolutely, because like when I was chatting to you at Cereals, Tony, it enables the grower to understand what they've got to start with, and then they can start putting stuff in, taking stuff out of the system, and actually having more detailed soil analysis. Certainly, from the recent the report from the Environment Agency that's recently come out, we're still finding farmers who don't have soil analysis. Now, over here in the arable east, a large proportion of farmers have soil analysis, but I think with providing more detail around that soil test does enable you to result in better planning, and having utilizing tools like Contour. Within Contour, we can produce livestock planning modules as well, so we can calculate manure produced on the farm. And I think William might touch upon this in a little while as well. But I think using whatever technologies you've got available to you is really important, because things have moved on at quite a pace now, and there's a lot of things that growers may feel that might cost the earth actually don't really. So I think that's my advice to growers is go out and see what's out there really.
And as we come towards the end of this episode of Tramlines, what would be your top tips? How would you summarise your advice for those who are listening today? Tom?
Well, I think at the moment it's a difficult subject to talk about the SFI at the moment, but there are options for buffer zones and things like that. Simple solutions around fields to help reduce pollution risk. Obviously, organic manures, there are restrictions around buffer zones, boreholes, etc., that farmers need to adhere to. But then also, seeking advice, whether that's from a FACTS qualified advisor or someone from the Feed Advisory Service, whether you're in an intensive livestock system, or even if you're doing it yourself, just ask your local agronomist, FACTS qualified advisor to sense check it. Get a second pair of eyes and actually go, are we doing the right thing here? Can we do it better? And that's the whole point I say about keep reviewing what you do in terms of your everyday nutrient management, really.
And William, from your perspective, what would be your advice? What would be your top tips?
Yeah, so talk to your advisor and make sure you're doing what you need to be doing and doing the right thing. And if it all goes wrong, come and talk to us. We have advice on gov.uk about extreme circumstances. So we are the regulator. We will use advice-led regulation. We don't come in and immediately slap fines on and this sort of thing, unless there's something that requires that, if it's a pollution incident or whatever else. But we will advise farmers as to what they need to do to come into compliance. We'll set them a timescale over which they need to do that. We will take further enforcement action as necessary, but we'll be proportionate in how we do it. We are there to help farmers become compliant, and compliant farmers are better businesses, better for the environment.
Thank you, William and Tom, for sharing your expert knowledge discussing nutrient use and compliance and how good nutrient management is good for business. And don't forget, this episode qualifies for BASES and Naroso points. Do listen to further episodes here on Tramlines. And if you have any questions for our experts that you would like answered, email them in to info@agrii.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.